Tupac Shakur. From his lyrics to his interviews, Tupac Shakur seemed to know something the rest of the world didn't. In his 1996 track Ain't Hard to Find, Tupac says, "I heard rumors I died, murdered in cold blood, dramatized, only for those words to become disturbingly real just months later." In If I Die Tonight, he raps, "I've been shot and murdered. Can't tell you how it happened, word for word." He even said in an interview that he wouldn't make it to 25. True to his prediction, he died at the age of 25. The day Tupac was shot, September 7, 1996, felt too much like a movie for it to be real. Earlier that night, Tupac had gotten into a fight at the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas, beating down a known Crip gang member named Orlando Anderson. Moments later, his crew drove off in a BMW, with Tupac riding shotgun and Suge Knight behind the wheel. Around 11:15 p.m., while stopped at a red light, a white Cadillac pulled up right beside them, and immediately, 4 bullets were shot at Tupac's chest, pelvis, hand, and thigh. What's really strange is that Tupac wasn't wearing his bulletproof vest that night, something he usually never left behind. He survived 6 more days in a hospital, fighting off death, but his lungs collapsed, and on September 13th, he was gone. The clues were always there. In so many tears, he confesses, "I know my destiny is hell. Where did I fail? In only God can judge me," he says. "My only fear of death is reincarnation." His Machiavelli album, released posthumously, was titled The Don Illuminati, The 7-Day Theory, and it was recorded in just 7 days, like he was hurrying to record it before his death. Michael Jackson. Shortly before his end, Michael Jackson told friends and family he had a bad feeling, like something terrible was about to happen. He kept saying, "They're trying to kill me," pointing to vague figures he never really named. At the same time, his music and interviews started hinting at death and betrayal. In the song Escape, he sings, "Why is it I can't do whatever I want to, when it's my personal life and I don't live for you?" In Threatened, one of his later songs, he said, "I'm not a human being. I'm a monster." In This Is It, the promotional footage showed him repeatedly saying, "This is it. This is the final curtain call." In the Earth Song rehearsals, his voice cracked with emotion as he begged, "What about us?" as if he was already saying goodbye. In the months before his death, Michael's health was visibly deteriorating. He was rehearsing for his massive This Is It comeback tour with 50 shows in London that would have become the biggest return in music history. But behind the scenes, the king of pop's body was failing. He had lost a lot of weight, always seemed too weak to stand for long, and was struggling with chronic insomnia. He wasn't eating, barely sleeping, and had become completely dependent on his personal doctor, Conrad Murray. Michael had even begged for a hospital-grade anesthetic called propofol, just to get some rest. That's the same drug that ultimately stopped his heart. On June 25, 2009, inside his Los Angeles mansion, he was given a fatal mix of sedatives and propofol. Just before that, he had told his team, "They're going to kill me, and they're going to blame it on me." Hours later, he was found breathless, with no pulse. XXXTentacion. Born José Onfroy, XXXTentacion had a strange relationship with death, as if he knew something dark was coming for him. Not long before he died, he posted an Instagram live video saying, "If I'm going to die or ever be a sacrifice, I want to make sure that my life made at least 5 million kids happy." It sounded like a man saying his goodbye. His music was filled with talk of death, suicide, and betrayal. In Jocelyn Flores, Sad, and I Spoke to the Devil in Miami, he talked about the afterlife, depression, and the feeling of being hunted. He even used his own funeral as a theme, saying, "I gave her everything. She took my heart and left me lonely. I think broken heart's contagious. I won't fix. I'd rather weep." A few fans thought it was art, but others saw it as something closer to a prediction of dying. On June 18, 2018, XXX was shopping for motorcycles in Deerfield Beach, Florida. He'd just pulled out $50,000 in cash, maybe for a bike or something else. He was in his black BMW i8 when a dark SUV blocked him in. Two men jumped out, and within seconds he was shot multiple times in the neck. It was broad daylight. There were witnesses, but everything happened too fast, like it had been rehearsed. He was only 20. Just days before the shooting, he posted a cryptic message saying, "Energy never dies." After his death, fans revisited his lyrics and interviews and realized that everything he'd said about not making it past 21, betrayal, and being remembered as a sacrifice were his warning about his death to the world. Lisa Lopes, Lisa Left Eye. Lopes from TLC always had a weird spiritual intensity, like someone balancing between the living and the dead. In the weeks before her death, she was in Honduras filming a documentary meant to show her journey toward healing. But what she showed instead was a series of disturbing moments. In one scene, she visits a local spiritual healer, talks about energy, and then calmly mentions that a dark force has been following her. She even tells the camera she feels like something is after her and that maybe the force isn't meant for her, but for someone else. Then something horrifying happens. A few days before her death, she's in a van that accidentally strikes and kills a 10-year-old boy. His last name was Lopes. That's when she breaks down and says the most disturbing line. "I feel like there's a spirit out here that's trying to get me. Maybe it got the wrong Lopes." On April 25, 2002, Lisa was driving a Mitsubishi SUV, speeding down a narrow road in Honduras with friends and family on board. As the van swerved to avoid another vehicle, it flipped and rolled before crashing violently. Lisa was the only one killed. She was thrown from the car and her head smashed against the pavement. Her final moments were caught on video. She was filming from the passenger seat minutes before she decided to drive. She died at the age of 30, the same age she once said would be a turning point in her life. When fans watched the documentary after her death, eventually titled The Last Days of Left Eye, it didn't feel like a vacation video. It seemed more like a combination of goodbye clips from a woman who saw death coming and tried to dodge it, but eventually failed. Juice WRLD, born Jared Higgins, had a very weird, deep obsession with death and dying young. In several songs, he talked about overdosing, heartbreak, and not living past 21. In Legends, a tribute to XXXTentacion and Lil Peep, he sings, "What's the 27 Club? We ain't making it past 21." At the time, he was only 19 years old. Fans brushed it off as dark poetry, but looking back, it was a prophecy written in real time. He also talked a lot about drugs. In Empty and Lean With Me, he basically maps out the exact mix of substances that later killed him: Percocet, codeine, and anxiety pills. In his freestyles, he joked about his own funeral, and during an interview, he casually said, "I talk about death way too much. It's going to catch up to me." And it did. On December 8, 2019, Juice WRLD landed at Chicago's Midway Airport after a private flight from Los Angeles. He had just turned 21 6 days earlier. As the plane touched down, federal agents were already waiting. They had been tipped off that his team might be carrying guns and drugs. In a panic, Juice reportedly swallowed several Percocet pills to hide them, not knowing the dose would be deadly. Minutes later, he collapsed in a seizure and began bleeding from the mouth. Paramedics rushed to revive him, but it was too late. He died at the airport. The official cause was an accidental overdose of oxycodone and codeine. Besides being sudden, his death was something he'd predicted in his lyrics, lived in his habits, and joked about until it finally happened. Like he said himself, "I'm scared I won't make it to 21." And he truly didn't. John Lennon. John Lennon always talked about dying young. He even joked in the 60s that he'd probably be popped off by some loony. But in the late 70s, this stopped sounding like a joke. Lennon had gone quiet for a few years, focusing on raising his son and rediscovering life outside of fame. But when he came back with Double Fantasy in 1980, the lyrics had a strange calmness to them, like a man trying to say goodbye without actually saying it. In Watching the Wheels, he talks about stepping off the ride of fame. In Beautiful Boy, he softly whispers to his son, "I can hardly wait to see you come of age, but I guess we'll both just have to be patient." It felt hopeful, but when people played these songs after his death, they sounded more like final letters. Days before he died, John signed an autograph for a man outside his apartment. That man was Mark David Chapman, his killer. Lennon smiled, signed the record, and walked inside. On December 8, 1980, just before 11 p.m., Lennon was returning to his apartment at the Dakota in New York City with his wife, Yoko Ono. As he walked toward the building, Chapman, who had been waiting all day with a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, pulled out a revolver and shot John 4 times in the back. Lennon immediately collapsed on the steps. He was pronounced dead on arrival at Roosevelt Hospital. In interviews just before his death, he said he was finally happy and at peace. It's almost as if death waited until he felt safe enough for it to happen. The man who sang "Imagine All the People Living Life in Peace" died in a moment people still think about decades later. Jimi Hendrix. For months, Jimi Hendrix's friends and bandmates noticed that he had become more withdrawn and strangely introspective in months leading up to his death. He constantly talked about how soul-tired he was, even though he was physically healthy. In interviews, he made weird comments like, "I'm not sure I'm going to live to see 30. In one of his final songs, The Ballad of Jimmy, which was recorded years earlier, he actually says, many things he would try, for he knew soon he'd die. He even ends the song with the line, 5 years. This he said, he's not gone, he's just dead. And it was exactly 5 years later that he died. That same summer, Jimmy had told his girlfriend, Monica Danneman, "I don't want to be around tomorrow." People assumed he was just being dramatic, but deep down they knew Jimmy wasn't the kind of man to just say things for the sake of it. On the morning of September 18, 1970, Jimi Hendrix was found unconscious in a London flat. He had drunk red wine with sleeping pills. He took 18 Vesparax tablets, and that insane number is enough to kill several people. He is also choked on his own vomit. He was just 27 years old. The strange thing is, Hendrix had been planning a major shift in his career. He'd just played the Isle of Wight festival and was talking about creating a new sound that was more soulful and honest. But in his last days, people said he seemed bothered by something. He drew dark, chaotic pictures and was always talking about spirits. To top it all off, he wrote a poem the night before he died, titled The Story of Life, that ended with the words, "The story of life is quicker than the wink of an eye. The story of love is hello and goodbye, until we meet again." Amy Winehouse. Amy Winehouse was already singing about dying long before the world started worrying about her. In her most iconic song, Rehab, she shouts, "They tried to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no." This line felt rebellious at first, but in hindsight, it was very sad. Most of her lyrics were confessions disguised as melodic songs. In Back to Black, she sings, "We only said goodbye with words. I died 100 times." Even in interviews, she said things that felt like warnings, casually mentioning that she didn't expect to live a long life. She joked often about dying at 27, and her friends later said she had become obsessed with the 27 Club and felt like she was supposed to be part of it. When she wasn't performing, she was spiraling, from battling addiction and dealing with heartbreak to struggling with the pressure of being a celebrity. On July 23, 2011, Amy Winehouse was found dead in her London home, surrounded by empty vodka bottles. Her cause of death was alcohol poisoning. It was so bad that her blood alcohol level was 5 times the legal driving limit. She hadn't touched hard drugs in months, but the damage had already been done. It was revealed that she had gone silent in her final days, barely leaving the house, and canceled all her performances. She told people she was simply tired of everything: fame, fighting, and trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. She once told her doctor, "I don't want to die, but I don't want to live like this either." She ended up not only joining the 27 Club, but also becoming one of its members with the most tragic life stories. Peter Steele. From the start, Peter Steele, the frontman of Type O Negative, sang music that had dark humor, heartbreak, and death. But by the early 2000s, his songs started sounding less artistic and more like warnings. In Everyone I Love Is Dead and Dead Again, he sang openly about addiction, betrayal, and wanting to disappear. He joked in interviews about dying young, even appearing on a magazine cover in 2005 with the title Peter Steele, 1962 to 2005, as if predicting his own death. That same year, he vanished from the public eye for months. People quickly thought he was dead. When he finally returned, he admitted he'd been institutionalized and was struggling with drug problems and paranoia. A friend said he constantly talked about death, as if it was sitting in the same room with him. His last years were filled with attempts at redemption, but the shadow never left. On April 14, 2010, Peter Steele died of heart failure at just 48 years old. The night before, he told a bandmate he felt unusually calm, like something was about to happen. He had been trying to get clean and even talked about writing a new album with a more hopeful tone, but his body couldn't keep up. Years of drug use, depression, and a constant dread had worn him down. What makes his death feel so disturbing is how often he'd laid it all out in his lyrics. Mac Miller. Mac Miller's journey from frat rap party kid to introspective soul poet was one of the most dramatic evolutions in hip-hop, and toward the end of his life, it felt like he was carrying a weight way too heavy for his age. In his last few albums, especially Swimming in Circles, Mac's lyrics were about sadness, acceptance, and strange mentions of closure. In Self-Care, he raps, "I'm treating me right, yeah, I'm switching the vibe. I could fly if I wanted to," but behind those lines was a man fighting deep demons. He often spoke about being stuck between wanting to live better and feeling pulled back into the void. After his breakup with Ariana Grande, his struggles with addiction worsened, and he openly admitted to being lost. In interviews, his voice was calm, like he had made peace with something terrifying, and his music wasn't about fame anymore. It was about surviving himself. On September 7, 2018, Mac Miller was found dead in his home in Los Angeles from an accidental overdose of fentanyl, alcohol, and cocaine. He was only 26. Just a month earlier, he had released Swimming, an album filled with lines that sounded like slow-motion goodbyes. In 2009, he says, "I don't need to lie no more. Nowadays, all I do is shine, take a breath, and ease my mind." He had finally started making the kind of music he said he'd always wanted to. Raw, melodic, and brutally honest. But fentanyl-laced pills, sold to him by a dealer he trusted, ended everything. Bob Marley. Bob Marley always believed life was spiritual, and as he got older, it was like he could feel the battle closing in. His lyrics had always been filled with truth, rebellion, and prophecy. But in his final years, they started sounding more personal and urgent. In Running Away, he sang, "You can't run away from yourself." And in Redemption Song, his last performance before his death, he pleaded, "Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom?" That song, with just his voice and a guitar, sounded like a farewell. Marley once said in an interview, "My life is only important if I can help plenty people." But privately, he was worried. After collapsing while jogging in 1977, doctors found a dark spot under his toenail. It was melanoma, a rare and aggressive cancer. He refused amputation, partly because of his Rastafarian beliefs, and partly because he didn't want to lose mobility and stop performing. But the cancer spread, and Bob kept singing like a man racing against time. By 1980, his body was failing, but he still pushed through a successful world tour. On stage, he looked thinner, more exhausted, but he tried to maintain his energy. He knew the end was near, and he started telling people close to him. He even visited Ethiopia, his spiritual homeland, and gave away many of his possessions, quietly making peace. On May 11, 1981, Bob Marley died in Miami, surrounded by family. His last words to his son, Ziggy, were, "Money can't buy life." John Denver. John Denver had the voice of a gentle wanderer, but toward the end of his life, that warm, nature-loving soul started sounding more like a man searching for something that felt out of reach. He'd always sung about flying, leaving, and returning to the earth, but as the years went by, those metaphors sounded more like reflections. In Looking for Space, he wrote, "On the road of experience, I'm trying to find my own way." He often spoke about being restless, about feeling like he was born to be in the sky. He became obsessed with aviation, even when his pilot's license was suspended due to DUIs. Friends said he always talked about urgently needing to get up in the air because it was the only place he felt free. In Flying for Me, a tribute to the Challenger astronauts, he sang, "They were flying for me, they were flying for you." Little did anyone know that those lyrics would come back full circle in the strangest way possible. On October 12, 1997, John Denver took off solo in his experimental lightweight aircraft over Monterey Bay, California. The plane was custom-built and tricky to handle, with a fuel selector valve located in a position that forced the pilot to twist awkwardly to reach it. Witnesses said his flight looked pretty smooth until it suddenly nosedived straight into the water. He died instantly at the age of 53. The crash was ruled an accident, but everything leading up to it felt like a series of red flags Denver had ignored. He had always talked about flying as a spiritual escape and once said, "Music and flying are the two things that make me feel truly alive." While flying did make him feel alive, it was also what tragically took his life. Which of these predictions did you notice when they first happened? Share with us in the comments. If you enjoyed watching this video, then hit the like button and share with your friends and family. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then subscribe to our channel and hit the notification icon so you don't miss our next uploads.